Welcome to the College Neuro Network, a podcast series part of Simply Neuroscience's The Synapse. My name is Sasha.
And my name is Sarah, and we're your hosts for today. The College Neuro Network has discussions with undergraduate students studying neuroscience and neuroscience professors in order to gain insight into the neuroscience department and opportunities in the nation's top universities.
Today's episode is focused on Yale University, a private Ivy League research university in New Haven, Connecticut. With its hundreds of study, research, and internship opportunities, passionate student body, and diverse curriculum, Yale ranks number 3 in national universities by the U.S. News and World Report.
Today, joining us is Renee Tung, an undergraduate at Yale University. Welcome, Renee. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss your experiences at Yale as a student studying neuroscience.
So first, can you please introduce yourself and tell us what really sparked your interest in neuroscience?
My name is Renee. I'm currently a rising senior at Yale studying neuroscience. And to start off, what sparked my interest in neuroscience? So for a very long time, I've been playing piano and I've been very interested in music. So what kind of got me started was the question of, why do people enjoy listening to music? What is it about it that makes it so fun for so many people? When they're listening to music, different areas of the brain are becoming more active that lead us to feel more happy or pleasurable feelings and things like that. So one thing kind of led to another, and I ended up getting really into music neuroscience research, along with, for example, like fMRI studies and just things like that. So that kind of is what started.
That's incredible. Yeah, I'm also a pianist, so that's amazing to hear. And also for Simply Neuroscience, we're actually starting an introductory course that studies the intersection between music and the brain. So that's really fascinating that's what got you hooked into neuroscience as well. So I guess our next question for you is, what factors drew you specifically to committing to Yale University compared to other institutions?
Something I haven't mentioned, I guess, is I'm currently pre-med, and that was what I was considering as well when I was going into college. So sort of the idea that I would be studying biology, sciences, STEM-focused areas for so long after college. I was hoping to go to a school that also had a broad range of different people who were very interested in the humanities and the social sciences. So I kind of chose Yale to get a broader scope of a whole bunch of different areas rather than focusing specifically only on STEM. And also I think Yale has a very great arts scene and extracurriculars as well. So as mentioned, I play piano, so I was hoping also to get involved in that and other music arts related areas. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I think that's definitely a strength of going to kind of a liberal arts college inside of this bigger research university, is that you really have that breadth of experience and opportunity to learn so many different things. And then, so our next question for you is, in your opinion, what do you think sets Yale's neuroscience department from other institutions?
Yeah, so I can't say I know too much about the neuroscience department of other institutions just because I'm not quite there. But I think at Yale, we have the undergraduate major that's relatively new, but in addition, there are also the graduate programs. We have the interdepartmental neuroscience program, which is a graduate program, and also I think there's a neuroscience section within the biology. Basically, there are a lot of opportunities to do research in neuroscience in a whole bunch of different areas with a lot of different approaches, because in neuroscience you can have a more computational approach, you can have a more biological approach, you can study it from a more psychological point of view. There are a lot of different ways that a lot of different researchers are approaching studying the brain. And I think that at Yale, just because we have so many professors and doing research in all of these different areas, there's a lot of opportunity to get involved in the specific kind of research that you're interested in.
Great. We actually interviewed Professor Crystal, who's a professor at Yale right now, and he also talked about the same thing, about how Yale is very interdisciplinary in terms of even within the neuroscience department, how you have all these different fields coming together. So that's really interesting to hear you say the same thing as well. And our next question for you is, so far, what has been your favorite class as a neuroscience major and why?
That's a tough one. I would say my favorite class so far has been a class I took last spring called research methods in human neuroscience, just because I guess personally I've always been interested in sort of imaging studies and like how we study the brain, like what are the tools that we can use to like figure out so many things about how the brain works. So I guess in this class I found it particularly interesting because that was exactly what we looked at, like how people design the experiments and use the tools to understand these different conclusions they were able to draw from this study. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Yeah.
Sounds really cool. And kind of like along the same lines, we wanted to ask you if you have a favorite professor.
That's hard. A lot of the neuroscience professors are really great. I guess one, for example, is Gregory McCarthy. He teaches the introduction to basically the intro to neuro course, which is called the human brain at Yale. So he's a very entertaining professor. He also taught the research methods course that I just mentioned. So.
Oh, nice. Great. And so our next question for you is, speaking of professors, how accessible do you think they are at Yale? And is it easy to get into contact with them for help or research opportunities?
Yeah, for sure. It's fairly easy. Yeah. In terms of professors, I guess, of classes, most of them have office hours during the week, so you can go if you have questions or if you want to talk, or a lot of times they're open to email as well. If you just send an email saying, oh, I have like questions about this or that, you can like schedule a time and talk. So it's fairly easy. And similarly for research, how I got involved was mainly just sending cold emails. I was like, hey, I've read some of your papers. I'm interested in your work. Like, can I come and talk to you for a bit to see if like I can join your lab or something? So that worked out fairly well as well. And I think that's like the majority experience. Like people don't find it too difficult to find a lab to work in. Yeah.
So you mentioned how you're both a neuroscience major and pre-med. So we were kind of wondering how demanding it is to study neuroscience and be in the pre-med track at Yale. Like, what does your day-to-day schedule look like, you know, in terms of how much time you spend on homework, studying, extracurriculars, downtime, etc.?
That, I think it depends largely on the person and like the classes you choose. And actually, I guess the neuroscience major at Yale overlaps a decent amount with the pre-med requirements if you wanted to, because the neuroscience major is fairly flexible in terms of like the electives and things. So I guess for, let me think. For the pre-med courses, a lot of them are more introductory classes, for example, like biology, chemistry, organic chemistry, physics, that kind of thing. So yeah, so those classes, they took an average amount of time, I would say. Like some classes are harder, for example, biochemistry, organic chemistry too, like but otherwise it's mostly okay. For the neuroscience classes I've taken, I think a lot of it is just really dependent on the class, like how much time you put into it. And honestly, I would also say in terms of the balance of like the day-to-day schedule, for me, I like to put most of my classes like in the morning, so I'm done by the afternoon, so I can go to lab and work until kind of like at evening time. So that's kind of how I do it, but everybody does it really differently. So I mean, I'm not too sure if you want a general answer, but yeah. And I guess in terms of work, usually the intro pre-med classes have like one problem set a week, and there are a lot of like office hours available. So the time range spent on that can really depend on the specific class, but I'd say generally like maybe 2 to 5 hours to 7 hours for a P set, depending on the class. And also just like studying for midterms takes time too. But I guess otherwise, a lot of time is just like kind of up to you where you want to spend it. And so that could be research, that could be other extracurriculars, that could just be like getting dinner or like hanging out with friends. So I mean, it really depends on whatever you want to do. So
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about kind of like research. So we were kind of wondering if you've had the opportunity to conduct neuroscience research, like, can you tell us a little bit about it?
yeah. So for me, I first started doing research the summer after my first year. which I think is generally a time where a good number of students start rather than immediately like entering first year. But yeah, so I joined a lab, the Blumenfeld lab at Yale, which is a lab that studies epilepsy and consciousness. So yeah, epilepsy had been a topic that I've been interested in for some time as well. So I emailed the PI in like December or so, talked with him, and then wrote up a proposal for summer research fellowship, which a number of students do. At Yale, there's a specific first year summer research fellowship that you can apply to that will provide a stipend for your summer research. So that's what I ended up doing. Spent the summer in New Haven doing research in the lab. It was a lot of fun, and funnily enough, I guess, like before that, I mentioned I was pre-med coming in from high school. I hadn't really thought about doing research at all, but after spending more time in the lab, I'm thinking about doing a PhD. So I'm currently an MD, PhD hopeful. So that's where things are kind of bad. But yeah, I've had a great research experience at Yale. So I did research that summer. I took research for credit during those 2 semesters of sophomore year. I spent the next summer in New Haven again in the same lab, and then I did research during the semester again for 10 hours a week. So it's been a lot of fun and something that I really enjoyed. So yeah.
That sounds awesome. So our next question is, what is your favorite thing about studying neuroscience at Yale?
Honestly, for me, I just really enjoy the research. I think kind of evident from like my previous answer. It's been a lot of fun working in the lab, getting to know a lot of different people, like grad students. But yeah, so it's been a lot of fun, like being able to work in a lab, hearing other people talk about their experiences and their research as well. Also, I think there's a good scope of like different courses that are offered under neuroscience at Yale. So I think it's been fairly fun as well, just taking neuro courses, learning more.
Yeah, that's so amazing how you started conducting research at Yale, and that kind of like made you think more about perhaps pursuing a PhD and going on MD PhD track, which is a track that I'm actually interested in as well. So that's really cool. And kind of another question regarding research is, do you think it's competitive to get a research opportunity since the research labs also take graduate students as well?
I don't think so. Like, I think, I guess it depends on the PI, but I feel like most labs are receptive to having undergrads as well. And there are just so many labs in general at Yale to join that are all like do very interesting research. So even if you don't get into one, there are so many other ones. And if you want to do research, there is pretty much always going to be like an opportunity.
Great. And so our next question for you, you talked a little bit about how you're planning on going on the MD PhD track, hopefully. So we were wondering if you could talk more about like your future plans after your undergraduate studies and kind of where you want to go in the future.
To start off, it's not completely like set in stone, and I think that's the case for a lot of people as well. So I guess after I finish my senior year this year, I'm planning to do a gap year to do research in some institution somewhere currently unknown, but that's something I'll be applying to and figuring out during this year. And during that time, I'm planning to also start the application cycle and everything for applying to MD PhD programs or whatever it will be by then. So yeah, but probably MD PhD programs. And then after that, I'm hoping to, just hopefully do research eventually on brain-computer interfaces, but yeah.
So our next question for you is, do you have any tips on how high school students, so like me and Sarah are both rising seniors, so people in high school that are thinking about majoring in neuroscience, and how they can get involved in neuroscience in terms of extracurriculars or organizations during high school?
So yeah, it's kind of difficult because I feel like neuroscience isn't a topic that is focused on too much in the normal high school curriculum outside of maybe a bit of mention in like biology, or sometimes psychology does do a mention. But yeah, so I think at least for me personally, a lot of how I got involved in neuroscience was self-study, but I know that others have been involved in things such as the Brain Bee. So that's something that we at Yale also are organizing. The neuroscience people at Yale are also organizing like Brain Bees, things like that. But you can also try seeing if there are high school research opportunities in neuroscience, if that's a possibility, or if the local if there's a local university, if they do anything related to neuroscience outreach, that's a possibility. Yeah, and I think in terms of neuroscience, just because there are so many different areas, I think, or different ways to approach neuroscience, I think in college, or like when you take that first sort of like intro course or things like that, you start getting like a broader sense of like the different areas and different ways that people can approach it. So I would say but you don't have to, basically, you don't have to be super invested in any one specific part of neuroscience or say, this is it, this is what I want to study, and that is final. There's nothing else for me. I would just say, like, keep an open mind. There's so many different ways you can study it. So yeah.
So I guess you kind of touched on this a little, but we were wondering if you had like any advice or tips for high school students listening who kind of want to apply to Yale to study neuroscience, or honestly anything in the near future.
Advice, huh? I would just say in general, just in high school, just pursue the things that you really enjoy. Pursue the things that make you excited, that make you want to learn more, that you feel happy when you're learning about. That's kind of the thing, I guess. I think when you're applying to college, people are kind of looking for what you're excited about, what drives you, what makes you want to do more. So I think just finding, or like doing what you like in general because you like it is my advice, I guess.
Great, thank you so much. That wraps up our questions for you. So thank you for taking the time again to speak with us for the College Neuro Network. Your responses were so insightful, and they will definitely help any high school students listening who are researching colleges and are interested in majoring or minoring in neuroscience.
Thank you so much. It was so great to talk to you.
No problem. Yeah, thanks for inviting me.